future of work is chaos. And this is a very, very good thing. I recently went home to South Africa, and I needed to soak up some sun with my family, and one of the amazing traditions that my mom has is that she always eats chocolate on a Sunday morning for breakfast. And so it was a Sunday when I was basically coming to the end of my visit, and she decided that because I was flying out that afternoon back to Ireland, that she wasn't only just going to eat chocolate for breakfast with me, but we were actually going to have chocolate cake for breakfast. And she invited one of my friends over, and she brought her little boy with. And we were sitting outside, and the chocolate cake was on the table, and my mom dished slices up onto each of the plates. And my friend tried to take the cake fork and to take a piece of the cake and to feed her son. And this little boy looked at her, and he said, kind of like with a very quizzical look, took the fork out of her hand, threw it down on the grass, took the piece of cake and just stuffed it into his mouth. And there was chocolate all over his face. And when I was preparing this talk, I was specifically thinking about this scenario. And I was thinking it's really, really interesting because from within this one situation, there's two types of chaos that can emerge. Had my friend insisted that her son eat the chocolate cake with the fork, like a very obedient child, following parental instructions, the child most likely would not have been very happy. Okay? Tantrum would have ensued because the child wants to eat the cake in a very particular way. And my friend decided instead to leave him. And so the only chaos that she had to deal with was this dirty face. Okay? And the very interesting thing when it comes to chaos is that when we hear that word, we don't like it. Okay? And I hear this very often because I talk to clients and I talk to people, and when you hear the word chaos, people kind of like pull back and go, no, because when we think about chaos, we think about things like disorder, disarray, disruption, and it makes us feel uncomfortable. But the very interesting thing about chaos, if you look at the actual definition of chaos, is that it's a very complex system whose behavior is so unpredictable that it appears random. And this complex system is very, very sensitive to micro changes that happen in it. And so if you think of our traditional understanding of chaos, and you think of the actual definition of chaos, we don't understand chaos to be what it actually is. We need to adjust our thinking when it comes to chaos. It's a complex system, but it is a system. And it functions. It's not disorder. It's not disarray. It's not disruption. In preparation for this talk, I sent out a questionnaire and I asked people one single question. I said to them, if you can tell me one thing about the future of work, what is it that you would say? And I got more than 200 responses back across various channels, and I collated all of the information. And the very interesting thing is that there's a few key things that keep emerging when people think about the future of work. Things like play, things like creativity, collaboration, integration, freedom. Let's stop and consider those things for a moment. We all want them. We all want creativity in work. We want work to be playful. But the very interesting thing that struck me about every single one of these 200 plus answers that I received is that nobody considered or spoke about the process that it takes to get to a place of play, to get to a place of collaboration. Everybody spoke about the end results, and that's what we want. We want certain results, but we don't really give due consideration to what it takes to get there. Okay? And what I love about this, and it was so interesting yesterday when we were busy practicing, and Pedros basically stood up and did that poem from Ithaka. I couldn't believe it. I actually got goosebumps because C.P. Cavafy has always been one of my favorite poets. And Ithaka is actually a poem that I have written on my goal wall at home because it is such a good reminder for us that it's about the journey. It's not about the end result. And so what we need to think about is how do we get to that place of play and collaboration and integration and all these things, this freedom that we want in work. And I want you to turn with me, think in your minds, to a children's playground. Think about the last time that you watched kids playing. Okay? Imagine the actual playground. If you were to stand on the outside of it, it seems very, very, very chaotic. But it actually isn't, because it's a very specific system. It's complex, but it's got a boundary line. There's a swing, there's a slide, there's a sand pit, there's a jungle gym with a fireman's pole. It's a complex system, but it's got very, very specific things within it. And those things, those pieces of equipment, determine behavior. And if you were to watch kids playing, what happens is that their behavior is unpredictable. Because a little boy will run and he'll slide down the slide or down the fireman's pole. And then he'll decide, I want to go and play on the merry-go-round. And so you have play, you have collaboration, you have all of those things that we want in work. But you have it because it's a system. It's a complex system that determines a specific type of behavior. And so what we need to remember when it comes to the future of work is that there's three components. There's the human component, there's the technology and the systems that make up work, and then there's the physical space. And the interesting thing when you think about how work is controlled, okay? If you think about how leaders drive work and control the outcomes of business, they tend to focus on the humans. Think about things like performance management. Think about things like HR systems, leave control, all of those things that we try to control human behavior, but we don't give enough due consideration to the systems and the space that make up work, because it's actually those two things that determine the behavior. And so my challenge, not only to you as an audience, but to the world, is that we need to shift focus. If we really want a workplace that is creative, that is collaborative, that is open, that's grounded in trust between people, then we need to really, really review the systems and the spaces that we create. And we need to stop focusing on trying to control human behavior. Because it's a complex system, but people's creativity, people's essence, their core, can only be unleashed in this complex system if we relook at the way we're doing things. And very interestingly, our company is always approached by people when they want things to be organized, when they want things to be structured. People come to us and they say to us, we need to grow, we need to look at the way we're doing things inside our own company, and we want you to help us structure us, put processes in place, put systems in place. And the very interesting thing is that the data is starting to show me that a chaotic approach to this is actually a very good way to go. Which is why I'm talking to you about the future of work being very chaotic today. And so what we've done over the past 18 months is that we have basically experimented. When our clients come to us and they say to us, implement systems for us. So the systems I want you to be thinking about as I talk through these two experiments is things like project management systems, things like task management systems, collaboration systems, systems that enable people to work better. Okay? What we've been doing is we have been experimenting with two different types of approaches. And very interestingly enough, the workplaces where creativity emerges, the workplaces where freedom and trust emerges, is where the system implementation has been approached from a very chaotic perspective. And so what's happened is when we've approached these experiments and these system implementations from a very systematic approach, what's happened is that the managers have sat down and they've said, right, we're going to be rolling this system out within the organization. We want our teams to work in a different way. So what we're going to do is we're going to sit down and we are going to define how we want people to work within these systems. Okay? Very interestingly enough, if you think about the process of actually rolling these systems out, management sits down and they decide these are the different features in the system, this is how we want people to use them. And what they then go and do is they basically decide, they set up a whole lot of protocols, create external documentation, they issue the documentation to people, and basically let people into the system wave by wave by wave by wave. So it's a very, very systematic approach to change management. Okay? And this is a very traditional view, and people have always said, research shows us that if you do the systematic thing, you have really, really good uptake. But I want to challenge that, because we're seeing different data. We're seeing different types of behavior emerging. Because in the experiments where we've taken and approached things from a totally, totally different perspective, where we've said, we're not going to do this in waves. We're going to bring everybody into the system at once. Okay? We're not going to sit down with a select group of managers and define how we want people to work in these systems. We're going to let them in, and we're going to let them figure out how best they themselves work. Okay? Because ultimately, if you think about it, management doesn't really understand the day-to-day intricacies of somebody's job. You understand your job way better than anybody else around you. And so what we found is that when we unleash people into these systems and literally only provide them with one anchor, okay? And so when I say the word anchor, I'm basically saying I'm creating that boundary line like you find in a children's playground. And the anchor that we've always given to people is we've said to them, the only thing you need to do in the system is go and create your own task list. Okay? So all that we've done is we've unleashed everybody into the system, but we've said to them, just do that one thing to make sure that there's this consistent thread of behavior running through everybody's behavior. And what then happens is, because there's that one thing inside the system that everybody's doing, people very, very quickly start navigating and finding their way around the system. And they find different ways of working. And they go, you know what, that's actually a really, really good way to approach this, and I think we should be doing this. And the collaboration happens. The creativity comes to the fore. And so this is why I want to propose that the future of work is chaotic. We can't carry on controlling humans. We have to unleash them. And we have to realize that it's about putting the systems and the processes and the spaces in place to create play and collaboration and freedom and trust. What does this have to do with origins? It has everything to do with origins, because generally when we're walking into the future, what we try to do is we try to bring the lessons that we've learned with us into the future. But sometimes we need to be a little bit more radical than that. Sometimes we need to step back and we need to start from the beginning. We need to look at things from a very, very fresh perspective. And so that's the challenge I want to leave with you, is that the future of work is about us as a society going back to the drawing board and saying, we want the collaboration, we want the freedom, we want the trust. Let's completely reinvent the system. And so, the future of work is chaos. Thank you for having me here today.